So Mike grew up on a farm very close to the Elora Research Station. He graduated from the University of Guelph with a Bachelor of Science in Animal Science and a Master's in Animal Breeding. His career has taken many turns and provided him with an experience in university, industry, and government. He'll be sharing some of his experiences today with a focus on what to consider regarding the people element of project management. So thanks and welcome, Mike, to the speech.
Just the arrow right?
Just the arrow right.
Perfect. Good morning, everybody. I've met a couple, and just to help me know who I'm speaking to, please put your hand to your grad student. Wow. Okay. Put your hand to your postdoc. You and other. Okay, I know you and Jesse speaker, and I know you. Okay, that's all. So lots of grad students there. This is really good. When I was a grad student, we didn't have opportunities like this. So I'm really glad to see you folks taking advantage of this sort of thing. What I want to talk about is, generally speaking, the people part of project management. It's going to wander a bit because I'm relating it to what I have experienced in my career. My career wandered a bit. And I'll come back to why I chose this title in the talk. So just a bit about, I think it's important to know on the people side, well, who am I and what have I done? So you can kind of relate where I'm coming from with my experiences, because they will be unique and relative to yours. So I was a regional manager at OMAF, now OMAFA, in between it was OMAFRA, and bounced around back and forth. It's crazy. Nobody here, so I can say they should just pick a name and stick with it. That was an initiative in the early 90s. And it was getting laptops into the hands of field staff in regional offices. That was a different world. OMAF had roughly 50 regional offices. They had all kinds of people in the field. None of them had computers. Computers were a new thing. That was a cell phone of the day. I doubt many people in this room recognize that, but that was called a bag phone. And if you were going on a trip, you could book the OMAF phone and take it with you in the car. Like, that was a different world. So that's the context of getting computers into people's hands. Very, very different than an IT department just showing up and there's a computer there for you the next day. At Beef Farmers of Ontario, while I was there as assistant manager, one of the things I was responsible for is their research and development file. And it quite literally was a pile on the corner of my desk. And it did not get the attention it deserved. That was common across a lot of different organizations. And one of the driving forces behind LRIC being created was for somebody in the livestock sector to actually take on and seriously and have that as a main focus. Business Improvement Initiative at Agricor. When I was director of operations there, we realized we need to do something very different here. So we put a team together and we were looking at doing business very differently. And I'll come back to how that went. When I was at Ag Sites, which is a producer cooperative, we had a lot of projects all under the umbrella of moving livestock industries forward with tools and evaluation. And then my last spot that I landed was as part of the LRIC team, work to improve the innovation system. That's really broad. And it's really neat because that let us do a whole lot of things under that umbrella. Some of them you can see there. They have a mentorship program for early career faculty. Certainly, if they're interested, postdocs or maybe even grad students, talk to Jean. It's, I think, a great program. The sole objective is getting early career faculty or those about to be connected with industry faster than they normally would. And Ricarda is one of the people who's been through that program. So if you want to ask her candid opinions, you can ask her at coffee break. I'll come back to this, but the alliance process. So the alliance is the pot of funding that's agreed between the University of Guelph and the ministry. And there are processes around that, research proposals. LRIC was very involved in that and providing input on how to improve it. Through the mentorship program, we then partnered with others to provide an award, a research award for cross-sector research across livestock species, and with a particular emphasis on cross-discipline research as well. And always looking at ways to try and build bridges across researchers. So people in engineering with people in OVC, that sort of thing. Going to pause for 1 second. What's the key word on that slide as far as project management goes? I'll give you a hint. It's 4 letters that start with T. Team. Because I did this slide set and I was driving down this morning. I thought, there's one point I've really got to make, and it's buried in this early slide. When you're building a project management team, you need to think of it as a team. And compare it to if you have a favorite sport or something else that involves a team, think about your project management team in that. What do you need on the team? What skills, abilities, what's the dynamic of the team? Do people get along? Is there clarity of roles? Is there clarity of objective? Is there honest, open, candid communications? All of the things that apply to a good team, whether it's a hockey team, a soccer team, apply to a project management team. And I think you take nothing away. I think that's one thing you really want to focus on. So common elements of any project management, there's an idea, there's a proposal, there's funding, timelines, deliverables. I think one thing we forget about sometimes though is that you need to be thinking about what's next. How are you using this project to set yourself up for success in the next project? Now I'll come back to how you help yourself do that. The other common element is people. There's not a project that doesn't involve people, whether that team is 2 people or 20 people, whether they're all at the University of Guelph, or whether part of the team is Elric, or whether the part of the team is another university, or the engineering department, or clinical animal science. So a little story here. That is a beef research center barn at Elora. It's not there anymore. It was built in 2017. I tried to find a picture of the old research station, but couldn't find one. So it's actually behind that building. So I grew up, have you put your hand up if you've been to the Elora research station? So if you haven't been there and you have an interest in livestock, please talk to Jean, because there's a great opportunity to get up there and see what facilities are available and what research is going on. So I grew up just the next road over from that. And in 1982, a long time ago, I was between my 3rd and 4th year at the University of Guelph undergrad, and I was working there as a summer student. The assistant manager at lunchtime one day, who had taken animal science, same degree as me, about 10 years before me, out of the blue, he said, if I was doing it all over again, I don't think I'd take animal science. I thought he was joking. He said, no, I'm serious. Really? Well, what would you take? And then he made me, I literally laughed out loud when he said psychology. Went, what? And he said, no, you get out in the world and you try to do things, no matter what you're doing, everything's about people. And that has stuck with me for you do the math, how many years since 1982 to today? And it's absolutely true. So most of you are deeply into research and activities that are very focused and very detailed. Just always remember that in life and in research and in project management, it really is all about people. So project management team probably, not always, includes the person that developed a proposal. It could have a number of different people doing a variety of types of work, collaborators, like I've mentioned, perhaps other universities, other departments. There's probably somebody writing. Too often, sadly, that's the same person that's preparing the proposal. And frankly, when I was at Elric, I heard this over and over. We're so buried in bureaucracy and so writing your proposals and reports that it's hard to actually do much research. The report recipient, even if that's somebody outside your organization, consider them on the periphery of your project management team. And all the things that you're doing with that team, you need to be thinking about them. It could be partners or investors. A lot of the research that goes on will have an investor, so to speak. It could be Beef Farmers Ontario Pork. Their role may be small in the scope of their project, but in their world, the amount that they're putting in is a big deal. And they do have a true vested interest in it. So don't say thanks for the money and forget them. You need to include them in your communications. And then you've got audiences of varying sizes and geography, depending on what it is that you're doing. So I'm thinking more of a research project here. And I do think that all projects require, and I almost think there should be a mandatory course, regardless of what discipline you're in, on people, on psychology, and how to effectively work with people. So building your team, I really think you have to start past your finish line, hence the term. So what is it that is success? And that doesn't mean at the end of your project, report written and accepted. No, you had an objective that likely went beyond that. Maybe not. Maybe your objective was to answer a question. Then probably writing the report, you've satisfied your finish line. If it's developing a solution, then you're probably working with people that goes beyond that. And if you're looking to implement change, then you're looking further out because you're into changing people's minds and behaviors. So how you define success past the finish line should have an impact on your project management team before you start the project. And the further you go up that ladder, your team is likely to get bigger, not necessarily the core team, but certainly the periphery of the team is going to get bigger. And the diversity of that team, by diversity, I mean, it won't just be people at the university doing research, but it might be the research liaison at Dairy Farmers of Ontario. It might be Jean or Kelly at Elric. It starts to expand what you need to be doing. So I'm going to run back through things that I learned around the people and project management in my career. So at Ontario, putting the new technology into the field, it really was changing how business was done. And the main thing I found out from that, which is not rocket science, but always remember, people are always interested in what it does for them. And we sometimes get frustrated with, well, you're only thinking about how this affects you. But the next time we're asked to do something, that is the human default. We always default to what does this mean to me, positive and negative. And that will impact your team and how you then get your results into action. At Beef Farmers of Ontario, we would have usually an annual call. In the grand scheme of things, it was not a lot of money. In the Beef Farmers of Ontario world, it was a significant amount of money. And we would put out a call, we would have priorities, researchers would come in and make presentations. The two things that stick with me from that, I guess three, it really helps if when you go in to make a presentation, you already know the people, you've talked to them, you know what they need, you know their situation. Ideally, if it's a farm, and I'm sorry, if I'm somebody here who's not going to be doing on-farm research or farm that relates to a farm, that's my background, so I'll be speaking more to that. But if you can get to their place and be in their world, get some dirt on your boots and visit their farm, you've got some credibility when you walk in the door. Like that relationship has started to be built. There was one researcher, I won't mention his name, who was it. He was the guy, and not in a good way. He never, ever had a report on time. I had to chase him relentlessly. I wasted so much time chasing him for reports. You don't want to be that person. Make sure you meet deadlines. The other thing is first impressions. At the time, it was the research committee of the organization, and researchers would come in and make presentations and normally dressed like business casual. They did have to overdress. But this one guy would walk in jeans and a t-shirt and sit in a slouch position. He just gave off the aura of, look, okay, you're going to give me the money or there's something wrong with you. And it just sent the wrong signals. Again, simple people stuff to pay attention to. When I was at Agricor, we started a business improvement initiative. So this was the CEO's commitment to doing something different. He asked me to lead it, and so I did. And IT was one of the central themes of doing it differently, and I kept harping that it's not just new IT system. There are people, things around this new IT system we need to be considering. We got well down the road on that, and it occurred to me, probably too late, that other senior managers or directors in the organization hadn't bought into this. And that is a really, really big problem because, again, people they weren't seeing the value that the CEO was. So clarity and buy-in are absolutely key. You're going to hear clarity a lot around project management team. The other thing I found that relates to project management, and to me, it's a double-edged sword. When you are doing project management, if you're going to have scope creep, and I can't stand here and say don't have scope creep, because sometimes scope creep makes a whole lot of sense. Like, oh, we can do this, and it makes sense to add something. Human tendency is like when you're creating a questionnaire, oh, well, let's ask this too, and you end up with 5 pages of a survey. It becomes unworkable. So try to avoid or manage scope creep, but also don't accept scope creep as an excuse from others that aren't delivering for you. Again, that comes back to crystal clarity on this is what we're doing, this is your role, and if that changes, have really good communications 2 ways, but don't accept, oh, no, it wasn't clear, or you had scope creep, because I've seen that used as an excuse for not delivering what was promised. When I was with Ag Sites, which is a producer cooperative, as I mentioned, I wrote probably 10 or 15 project proposals, maybe 20, I don't know what it was. Probably about $5 million that we attracted to the organization over that time period. So we interact with a lot of funding organizations, 4, I think. So dealing with a lot of different people. Things I learned there when I was applying for money, again, relationships. So if you can find somebody to work with in those funding organizations, get to know them, get to a level of trust. I'm not saying you have to be best friends, but you can have a casual conversation with them. There's a level of trust developed there. That's really, really helpful. I'm a visual person, so I always have pictures, but I found it really useful when I could go to the person, my contact in the funding organization, say, here's the picture. Here's what we're trying to create. Here's where we are now. Here's the piece of the puzzle that this proposal helps to create. So then in their world, they see, oh, I see how this fits. The next project, well, that was this. This is the next piece of the puzzle. That big picture of what you're trying to do might not relate as much to pure research at university, but if you can outline that big picture for funding organizations, it's really, really helpful, because otherwise there's a language barrier and a long-term understanding barrier between the person trying to get funding to do a project and where they or the industry is trying to get to. And good reporting. I made it just an absolute mission to make sure we had good reports on time. And so much so that one of the people I worked with was asked by one of the funding organizations to help them help other people give good reports. And a lot of that is just clarity up front and a good solid system of recording and being able to keep track of what happened. One of the little things that we did all the time, and it's so simple, is that when you're doing your budgeting and reporting, in your own Excel file, excuse me, have a column of notes. Because you will find, if you haven't already, you will make a decision, you'll carry on, and then you'll see a number 6 months later and think, wait a minute, why is that? And you kind of forget what the rationale was around the decision you made. Those notes are invaluable. They don't need to go to the funding organization, but it gives you credibility when you can answer the question quickly and accurately on what happened. So LRIC, spent 5 years with the LRIC, and one of the neat things about LRIC is they have an International Research Advisory Committee. Really cool group, really big thinking, always a challenge to distill their conversations into a report, because it's really, really big picture. There's a report on LRIC's website. It's about 2.5 years old now. And one of the things that this group did that I think is invaluable is they actually put on paper what is the innovation system. Because one of the challenges that we all face, not just in project management, is we'll be having discussions and maybe even debates when in fact we're using different definitions of the same word or how things fit together. So this is their really, really simple, but I think insightful definition of innovation. And of interest, of only 5 things, solid project management is in there as one of the 5 core elements. So priorities, and their point was we need priorities that are set collaboratively. Goes right back to relationships, understanding who you're working with. So if you're going to be doing work in the poultry sector, you better understand the poultry sector, get some dirt on your boots, go to a farm, know what their priorities are. The ministry, the academia and industry need to be doing those priorities together far, far better than they are now. Funding is always a challenge. It's more of a challenge. And unless something changes, it's going to be a critical challenge, particularly in agriculture. IP, so that's, I couldn't get commercialization as a word in there, so let's put IP. But that's if there's IP, successfully commercializing it. So again, that's past the finish line. That's getting something into the hands of Canadian farmers and commercialized. GRIP, as you've heard, is getting research into practice. That's changing behaviors on farm. May or may not include IP. That's why they're separate points. There's the Seeking Better report on the website that outlines this and then gives their recommendations for LRIC, university, industry, and the government on how to make each of those elements better. The entire report, including cover page, is 4 pages. That's very much by design so that it's readable, quick to get, and know, okay, here's what they're really saying. Sometimes I think clarity and brevity is something we also need to be thinking about in our communications. As part of working with LRIC, the Alliance is, put your hand up if you're not familiar with the Alliance. Okay, so thank you. The Alliance is a long-standing agreement that gets renewed every 5 years between the Ontario government through the Ministry of Agriculture and the University of Guelph. The funding that flows technically through Agricultural Research Institute of Ontario and then the University of Guelph manages research stations. It gets a little murky, but it's not that bad. Funds faculty positions. It funds the management of 14 research stations, including all the ones in Laura that if you haven't been there, you're going to, right? And it funds research. 2 years ago, I believe, was a call that involved about $7 million for research. And I know it decreased, but I can't remember the number. It doesn't matter. It's several millions of dollars of research funding available to University of Guelph faculty through the Alliance. On an annual basis, there are about 30 livestock proposals. And LRIC reviews all of those, and Gene works to get 3 additional industry reviewers for each proposal. So we're providing a lot of review input into this process. We sit at the review panel table along with the ministry and the university. And some of the observations I would make from that process and things start to overflow. When you think of innovation as a cycle, you can't just look at project management. You have to see how it fits with the other things. Priorities. If you're writing a proposal, make sure that you're meeting the funding priorities, but you can connect it to the end user priorities. And again, that goes back to people, because if you don't know those people, you can't really understand what their priorities are. So that's really key to be making industry connections. Anything you can do as a grad student or postdoc to leave the university setting and interact with the industry that you're affecting or trying to help, the better. Whether that's annual meetings of organizations, or it's visiting a research station, or LRIC does farm tours. They've had 3, I think, I can't remember, it doesn't matter. But it's basically get on a bus, go to a farm. So the 1, you get to see a farm, and 2, but very much by design, the target is 1/3 industry, 1/3 government, 1/3 academia on the bus. so that you start to make some of those connections on a bus. Fantastic opportunity. Again, I keep pointing to Gene. Talk to Gene. So team membership, it's linked to the big picture. The way the proposals are currently being written, I'm not sure I've ever really seen a good description of the big picture. Like, what's the big picture of what you're trying to do? So as a reviewer, you're stuck with, well, that's a one-off, but I think you did something like this. How does that relate? But if you have a big picture, simple, and again, that's thinking of your audience and how you communicate with them. Team membership. From what I've seen on research proposals, which in essence is your project management team, and you lay out the team, it seems to be a bit shotgun, to be frank. There's some obvious ones, but then I can't understand why some are missing and some are there that don't make sense. And then you have the situation of what I call the Band-Aids. So at the review table, somebody might speak up and say, well, they need Jen on this project. So it goes back as a, you need to add Jen, which I think is insane. Like, it shouldn't be for a review panel to say you need Jen, because nobody's talked to Jen. Nobody knows if Jen's available. It's crazy. Put the time into making sure you get your team correct the first time, so you avoid this. Because I have seen it where if the feedback is, get Jen, and Jen says, are you crazy? I have no time. I can't do this. So again, the people of the team is really important. The audiences, really think about that. Again, that's what's beyond your own finish line for the project. KTT and GRIP to drive change. Again, I think that's even more shotgun on a lot of proposals. So we're going to do everything. That's just a list of possible activities, when in fact, some projects shouldn't have half of those because it's just finding an answer. There are a lot of audiences after the fact. Other projects where there's huge change involved in that project, they underestimate what's involved in that KTT/GRIP activity. So that whole KTT GRIP, really think that through depending on what your project is, who the audience is, what teams and effort you need to put into place, and then make sure you build that into your proposal. There is a checklist to help you write proposals available through Elric. It's like I think it's one page. Like, did you do this, this, this? Again, very much designed to be really simple and fast. So just some thoughts. I've mentioned them already, but build strong connections with those across whatever your finish line is. Your project's not, view your project as ongoing and it's going to have impact. So think beyond that finish line of handing in a report. And when you do that, you'll start to understand what their needs and priorities are. I'd say develop field tests to promote your big picture. And I'd say try that. Do your big picture of what you're trying to create in the longer run, and then pick somebody that doesn't know anything about your research and explain it to them and see how it goes. Be able to describe your A to B. So if your picture is where you're trying to get to, that's B. Be able to say A on the same picture, like you could say, okay, these pieces are in place. 2 is, how do I get from A to B? Well, this piece is next, then this piece. It gives context to what you're trying to do. Obviously, learn from successes and failures. Put your hand up if you can name, I don't want the name, but put your hand up if you can name a mentor or more in your life. That's more than expected, and that's good. Having a mentor is really, really important, not just for project management, not just for research, but for more broadly. Build a team suited for each particular project. Broaden your teams. There's so many opportunities across disciplines and across sectors. As research money gets tighter and tighter, it's going to be far more important that we don't do a project in veal that affects dairy and then we redo it in dairy, or dairy and beef, or something related in engineering and animal science. We really need to find those bridges up front. One of the things that I did that I would highly recommend is the minute you get funding confirmed for a project, get the entire team in a room, not virtual, in a room. So they can stare each other in the eyes. They can ask the questions. They're focused. They're not looking over here with your Zoom meetings on here. Walk through the entire project so that everybody hears exactly what it is you're trying to do. Present your big picture, your A to B, talk about the budget, talk about who's on the team, talk about what their roles are, who's accountable for what the timelines are, and get crystal clarity up front. If it's a long-term project at all, repeat that. Don't just do it once. But if you're not doing that at the very beginning, then you risk miscommunication and misunderstanding that's really going to come back to haunt you. Never assume. Never assume people know what's in your head. Probably most people in this room are really good ideas people. And one of the challenges of being an ideas people is you start to assume, well, yeah, you knew that, didn't you? Don't you get my idea? And no, never make that assumption. Meet deadlines. And I think it's really important too with a project team, celebrate success. We don't do enough of that in the world these days, but at a project management level, I think it's really important because that's going to motivate people to keep wanting to work with you and create more success. Always end in 3. So people is everything in life, including in project management. If you don't have the people side nailed on project management, it really doesn't matter how good everything else works. Your vision beyond the line is going to determine your team makeup and really focus on it being a team and always relate it to the team of your choice, hockey, soccer, whatever. And that ensuring team clarity and constant communications. Never, ever, ever take that for granted and never assume that things are on track. People understand, people know the deadlines, people get busy and they need to be reminded as well. So I'll stop there and entertain any questions you've got.
Let's give one more round of applause for me.